Hi guys, hopefully you can hear me. We're not going to get started quite yet. We'll wait till a couple of minutes past the hour, but I can see the people are starting to join. As soon as I've been told there are enough folks in the room, we'll begin. But it's lovely to see you all joining us. Thank you for coming this morning. Hi, those of you who are just joining. It's 10 o'clock, and we'll just give it one more minute and then we'll kick off because we've only got the hour together. You're at the Early Career Researcher Support webinar for the next round of the Digital Good Research Fund from the Digital Good Network, just in case you thought you were supposed to be somewhere else. Okay, guys, we'll get started now. I've been told that we've got enough folks in the room that we can kick off. Thanks everybody for joining us for the Digital Good Network's Digital Good Research Fund support webinar for early career researchers for our 2025 call, our third round of the Digital Good Research Fund. My name is Ros Williams. Some of you might have seen me around at other Digital Good Network events, and I'm the associate director of the Digital Good Network, and it's a real pleasure to have you all joining us today. Thank you very much for being here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As some of you will know, as we tend to do this with our webinars, this will be recorded and it will be live streamed as well currently, obviously, because you're all joining us, but it'll also be recorded and then uploaded to our website after the event. So feel free, if you're taking lots of notes, to stop doing that. You can look back at this recording moving forward. Captions should be available. My colleague Dee and Ruth, who are both in the room with me, will be able to put instructions in the chat. Hopefully you already will see them there. A few folks have asked for Zoom captions and they have been made available today. There is a question and answer function in Zoom. Please don't use the chat to ask questions as is normal for Digital Good Network webinars. It's much easier for us to manage questions if they come through the Q&A function. If you've got any questions about how that works, do feel free to pop that in the chat and one of my colleagues will be able to guide you through that, but hopefully you'll be able to see that function. And obviously, if you've got any questions, you'll be very welcome to ask those over the course of this next hour. Please do that, as I say, using Q&A, but there will be occasions, there always are with these webinars, where you have a really specific question that won't be relevant to everybody else. You're also very welcome to ask that here, and we'll tell you that it's too specific and that you need to follow up by email. But if you already know that it's probably too specific, you're also very welcome to email us at info@digitalgood.net, and my colleague Ruth will triage that and get back to you, or one of us will get back to you from the network regarding your question. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. I'll give a really brief overview of the Digital Good Research Fund in this webinar. Before we talk specifically about guidance for you as early career researchers who are thinking about applying, we're really lucky as well to have Derya Özgul as well, who's an early career researcher recipient of the last round of the DGRF, as we call the Digital Good Research Fund. There are lots of acronyms today, so as I say them, if they confuse you, also pop that in the chat and we'll make sure that's really clear for you. And then we'll jump into a live Q&A where myself and Derya, if she's still around, will try to answer your questions as they come in. So this webinar is specifically for early career researchers who are thinking about applying to the DGRF. It's also for people who haven't really had much experience in completing an academic funding application before. We hope that this will be a useful tool for you in thinking about how you put your application together. And of course, if you think of others who might be early career researchers who'd find this valuable, who weren't able to make it, we'll be sure to give you the link to this recording after it's available and you can share it with them. I will just give, as I say, a really brief overview of the Digital Good Research Fund call, but to make the most use of this time together, I'm not going to belabor it. If you do want to learn more about the call, we've got a really clear project, a call webpage that you can look at. There's also a launch webinar that gives lots of detail about the call and a further Q&A more broadly about the call that you can look at if you're interested. But very briefly, the third theme of our Digital Good Research Fund is building the digital good. So we're interested in applications that propose to either generate or rework digital technologies with the intention of achieving the digital good, explore how the good might be built into specific technologies across contexts and domains, think about the roles of diverse communities, sectors and organisations, and also to test methodological innovations for building the digital good. As folks will perhaps have guessed, this is asking a lot, and we're not anticipating that any one application will do all of these things. I think particularly for early career researchers, I know the feeling all too well is that you try and jimmy lots of different things into your application. Doing one of these and doing it well, I think, is really a key sort of a key strategy for making sure that you're hitting the nail on the head. So don't feel like you have to do everything at once. We're not funding people with enough money to be able to do all of these things at once. So what are we looking for? As I said, there's a webinar that covers this in more detail, but the thing I really want to focus on here is that we're looking both for interdisciplinarity, connecting with communities and organisations external to academia, external to universities, but also vitally to promote early career researcher leadership. This is one of the key vehicles for one of the network's big goals, which is to develop early career researchers, is the Digital Good Research Fund. And through this fund, what we're wanting to do is ensure that ECRs have really good leadership opportunities. I will just note as well, whilst I'm on the call with you, that we do particularly encourage applications from quants and computational background applicants, as well as those applications led by disciplines that are underrepresented currently in our funding, psychology, comp sci and economics, or that use secondary data. But again, something that I'm flagging particularly of import to ECRs is that you don't need to be one of these. You certainly don't need to be all of these. And we will probably fund people that don't cover any of these areas, but we just want to flag these as priority areas where we'll be particularly interested to receive applications. Another of the things that I did want to very quickly flag is that this idea of the third round of the Digital Good Research Fund is specifically so that we can build upon stuff that we've already been doing together. You can learn a lot about the network and what we've already been up to through reading our building blocks and reflexive questions document, our what does it mean, what do we mean when we talk about a good digital society, BA discussion paper, and of course learning about all of our existing research. And you can learn about all of that on our website. If you go through the call website, you'll actually be able to find links to all of that. So please do make yourself familiar with all of the existing Digital Good Network activity, because successful applications will make it really clear and will signpost to how they are building upon, as well as building the digital good, how they're building upon the existing intellectual work of the network. We are actually funding up to £300,000 in this call. Something that folks, eagle-eyed folks, may notice is that we're funding probably fewer projects for more money, because we anticipate that actually some of the projects may be more expensive, potentially more practically based. So we're funding projects up to £75,000. I've got my colleague Ruth in the room with me, and if you've got questions about what FEC, full economic costing, means, I will not be able to answer them because it is baffling, but Ruth knows it in and out. And so if you have questions here, then put them in the chat. And if it's too complex, then Ruth will be able to pick that up with you if you email them at info@digitalgood.net. As you'll know, the application deadline is in June, and more information is available on our website. So one of the things I did want to flag about the broader ESRC Digital Good Network is that we're really focused on building research capability. And that means we're focused on early career researchers, as I said, and making sure that they're really a large part of the life of our network. And so you may be wondering what we mean when we talk about an early career researcher. This has changed over time because of UKRI's shifting definition. The important thing for you to know is that it is quite a flexible determination these days. What we define as an ECR, it used to be like 3 years out of your PhD. It's very, very different now. And I absolutely appreciate that different people's life experiences, care responsibilities, experiences, of course, of the pandemic and so on, will have put them at different positions in terms of their career development. And so years post-PhD and your job title cannot be the sole marker of your career progression. So actually it's a self-identification process now, where if you look at the form, and I'll point this out to you shortly, you need to just clarify who is an ECR and why they identify as such. And this is the part of the form. I'm just going to run through, before I move over to Duria, a couple of elements of the form that I think are particularly useful for you as an ECR and thinking about this. So please do be really clear about who in your team is an early career researcher. So offer their name, but also a brief justification, not too long, about why would they identify as an early career researcher, whether that's career progression and other things that would help us to understand that. And we're not going to be policing this specifically, but it is really important for us to know that early career researchers are part of your team, because if they are not, then you probably are not eligible to apply to the fund. So it's vital that you make a really clear account of who is an ECR. So please do ensure that you do that on the form. But naming, as I say, an ECR is not enough. It's also vital that they are integral, that they are central to the project itself. So through the project, if you're listening to this and you're not an ECR, you're perhaps somebody who's much more senior and thinking about what we mean by ECR and how we do this, how are you going to make sure that an ECR and their development is wended through the project? And this would be actually within the project design. It might be, for example, taking ownership of work package. So the ECR might, for example, be running work package 2, which is a proof of concept of an app or something like that. It might be that as the ECR, it's your actual first lead role as a project leader, or as we also use the idea of principal investigator, or principal applicant. We use all these different terms, but perhaps it's the first time that you've actually managed a large budget, for example. Please don't be overly generic when you describe this. Be really clear about what the leadership role is, or what the different leadership aspects are for the ECRs who are involved in your project. Don't say anything that just everybody could write, because it's not helpful for a reviewer to read that. So please do be really specific here. It's also, I think it's useful just to kind of flag as well a couple of things that we really look for in the Digital Good Network, Digital Good Research Fund, which is a focus on one of or more of our 3 societal challenges, which is equity, sustainability, and resilience. I will not talk about those in any depth now. There are plenty of resources online on our website where you can learn more about what we mean by each of these terms, but it is absolutely vital that your project makes it really clear how you are centering on one of those societal challenges. And indeed, now we have a drop-down box on the application form, which is the first time we've done this, just to really help us to make sure that we have a nice spread of different challenges across our portfolio. So when you're filling in the application form, you will see that you will be required to say which of these is your primary major societal challenge of focus. You may be focusing on more than one, absolutely fine. And it is actually quite commonly the case that you might be focused, for example, on resilience, but equity might also crop up, or equity, but sustainability might also crop up as well. In that case, please pick the primary one. We'll also be able to determine from the application itself what the secondary ones are as well. So when you are looking at the application, it's really, really clear. Well, it should be really, really clear to your reviewers, and think about in terms of developing your application that what you're trying to do is do favors for your reviewer. So you make it really easy for them to understand why it's relevant to the core, your project, which societal challenges are being dealt with. So don't just use the drop down. Make sure that it's also really clear in your answer to the how does your proposal contribute to the Digital Good Network answer, how the societal challenges are woven into your project ideas. As you'll know as well, we've also got equity, diversity and inclusion and internationalization statements on our website. I say as you will know. If you don't know that, which is understandable, please do go on the website and have a look at both of those. Reading them will give you a really clear idea of how we're thinking about those issues. It will also give you an idea of what we're looking for in our application forms, that you're taking these things seriously, and that you've really thought about those in relation to the activity that you're proposing to undertake. So as I say, we do have the different societal challenges. I did also want to flag that we have online materials. I mentioned the building blocks document that we've worked on over the previous few months, but we've also got the what do we mean when we talk about a good digital society paper, and a number of online events that you can watch back, like this one day you'll be able to learn more about the ideas that we're engaging with as a network. And it's absolutely vital that you do that, because it's foundational to this third call, that you make it really, really clear that you're building the digital good through building upon the ESRC Digital Good Network's work. And I know that sounds quite tricky, but I think it becomes easier and much easier to sort of manifest in your mind once you know what the Digital Good Network is all about. Interdisciplinarity is something I also just wanted to flag with everybody as well, because interdisciplinarity is very much at the heart of the ESRC Digital Good Network. We're really committed to ensuring that we have a diversity of disciplines included in our portfolio. I mentioned that we have some highlight areas where we're interested in drawing in particular gaps. And you don't necessarily have to cover one of those gaps, but I think it's absolutely vital that you clarify how your proposal is interdisciplinary. Your reviewer is going to be far more excited if you're drawing together what I would describe as quite distinctive disciplines. It's no clear-cut way of doing it, but imagine disciplines that might not be in the same faculty or even in the same building in a university. that might not show up at the same meetings or even go to the same conferences, rather than disciplines that might overlap at a conference or might be in the same faculty. That is not to say that we don't fund research that is only within one sort of disciplinary wheelhouse. So, for example, media and communication and sociology. Those might go together more commonly than not. But I would say that perhaps that's less distinctive in terms of its interdisciplinarity than, say, drawing in a designer or a computer scientist if you are somebody who does history, for example. So really think here about the disciplines that you can bring into conversation. And there is sufficient time that hopefully those of you who haven't yet been, who didn't go to our sandpit, who haven't made these connections yet, can build those connections. Do not just think about here interdisciplinarity for interdisciplinarity's sake. It's really important that you harness interdisciplinarity in your team in a meaningful way. So do not make it confusing for your reviewer who gets to the end of your application and thinks, oh, why on earth is there a computer scientist here? They're not doing anything to do with computer science. Rather, that should inform the methodologies or even the sort of the research questions or hypotheses that you're asking. And as I said, do bear in mind where we have gaps, but don't let this guide you necessarily to where you must fill those gaps, because we won't necessarily be funding people only in those gap areas. Although I will just flag that those gaps again, psychology, computer science and economics. So I'm going to pass over now to my colleague Durya Ozgul, who is one of the really successful recipients of our latest round of the Digital Good Research Fund. I will stop sharing my screen and invite Durya to take the mic. I'll mute. Durya is going to give some top tips, a bit of a reflection for 5 minutes on her experience with her fantastic project, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So thank you ever so much for listening to me. I hope this is useful, and do start popping your questions into the Q&A function if you haven't already.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rose. I just want to say that I remember like yesterday attending this webinar more than a year ago now, but yeah, it's really great to be here. So the project that I'm leading as part of this network is called Digitizing Identity. I won't go into much detail about my project, but I just want to mention that why I found it in the beginning a bit challenging, or like I was questioning whether I should be applying to this network at all, because I didn't exactly understand what digital good was. So in my project, we're looking into a very particular practice, UK Home Office's digitalization of immigration status. So they abolished all the cards now, and migrants in the UK have to verify their status through a very digital system. So we're looking into that transition and how it has impacted migrants with different statuses, and kind of looking into different structural issues. So just, I mean, I won't go into detail about my research, but just because of the nature of our project, I never framed it under digital goods, like this particular practice. But as I kind of attended this webinar, a very similar webinar a year ago, and then read about the how the network conceptualized what digital goods meant, I realized that actually the network also has a very quite critical approach to various types of digital technologies and how they can be used and what kind of issues they can lead to. So I guess right now you have a lot more resources as well on the website that you can read through. I would really advise you to read the guidance that's on the website, and then also listen to past events. It really helps you to clarify what the network means by digital good. So just a few tips from me as you prepare your application. I guess like for us at the time last year, the theme was more how to evaluate the digital good. So we started with that question, and we were already interested anyway, how to sort of think about Home Office's practice and how we can think about the impacts on people. So it was a central, I guess, aspect for our proposal. So for this year, it's about building the digital good. So think about that from the start, because that will change your framework, your questions, what you want to do at the end of the project. Also think about the specific societal challenges, as Rose mentioned. So for us, it was equity, for example. So we really started with that. And again, it will shape your framework and your design. So it's really important, I would say. Maybe, I mean, a few tips as you're kind of bringing together your research team. So maybe this is not a universal tip, but it really helped me. So for me, when we were kind of thinking about the team, I didn't start working with everyone from scratch because I thought it would be really difficult. So I really started with collaborating with a colleague of mine that I was working with together for a long time for different types of projects. And I knew how she was approaching things. I knew that we would be able to work together really well. And together we kind of thought about the questions, and we approached an organization that was already campaigning about this particular topic. And we approached them, and we had a really kind of intensive meetings, and we clicked on, and we made sure that we were on the same page with lots of different frameworks that we had in mind. So they were doing more practice work, and we were interested in the theoretical work. But I would really suggest you to kind of like have some team members, at least some members of the team that you are already familiar with and that you can trust, and you know that they're reliable, and you know they will kind of produce what they promise to do. And then we had some new members. As we were developing the project, we reached out to some people that we thought their expertise would really help us. Rose, do stop me, by the way, if I go over time. Another tip I would say, yeah, so like we reached out, I mean, I formed a team really based on the expertise of each member. So like one organization, for example, we thought would really be helpful for dissemination because they have a huge network of organizations. We had already worked with them in a different project, so we knew again they were reliable. And then we worked together with the computer scientists in our team again from the start because we thought that they had a very specific expertise on distributed systems. And then they brought in more expertise, in fact, that we weren't aware of with the use of NLP, for example, in our case. So yeah, I mean, just make sure that each team member has a specific expertise that they're bringing in, but also be open. I would say that they also probably have more expertise than you may not be aware of, and they may bring that in as you are shaping the proposal. So I guess like during the time of writing the proposal, having those intensive meetings and having those kind of like one-to-one several meetings really helps to shape the proposal, and you're sure like you can agree on exactly what you wanted to do. Just one final tip, or something that I didn't expect or plan for as a new PI, is that I just didn't know how much time it takes to collaborate and interact. Like especially if you are the PI, if you are leading a project, it really takes a lot of time to bringing the team together to do all the admin work, you know, like small things like writing RA advertisements, you know, budgets and stuff like that. All the types of invisible work, which I thought I would be able to do easily. And yeah, I did, obviously, I am doing, but at the same time, it does take a lot of time. So you really need to, I think, factor that in the budgets and like thinking about your time. But yeah, just one final thing. I guess, I mean, for us, what really helped, really, as I said, to have those intensive meetings together as a team before we applied, so that we were really clear from the beginning what we wanted to do, whether or not we agree on like our approach in general. From the start, like from the design of the project, but also towards dissemination as well, what we want to achieve with this project, all of those aspects were quite clear. And I think that really has helped so far with the implementation. So yeah, I would say be realistic and be clear about what you want to do with the proposal.
Thanks,
I
Julia.
just want to say the application form is quite clear. So it was really the one of the best application forms that I've seen. Like every question was very clear. So be specific with all of those answers.
Ruth's just out of shot, who designs our application forms, and put a thumbs up like this. So it's good to hear. Thanks, Julia. I mean, I think the point that you make about taking time is really important. That's something that I learned as an early career researcher as well, is that the sheer amount of time it takes to put an application together. It can be a waste of time if you come to something too late and you haven't got the time to put the care into it and to assemble the kind of group that you need. I mean, how long do you think it took you to actually pull together the application from the first idea, the first decision to apply to actually the deadline?
Yeah, it took around 2 months, I would say. Like, and the final month was quite intensive, even like the last few weeks, because we had some like additional sub questions. And then when we were preparing the budget, we realized that like some of them actually takes a lot more time and we don't have the budget for it. So we had to drop them off. So yeah, it kind of evolved over time. We were very clear with the main question, but the sub questions we had to sort of change over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst I've got you as well, I'll just pick on you with another question as well. I can see there are some questions coming into the Q&A. Folks, do feel free to put more in there. But do you see, you have distributed systems, natural language processing, all of these different kinds of things, and you're a sociologist. So I mean, how did that work? And was that a comfortable experience? And how did you find those people?
Yeah, so we reached out. I mean, I reached out to someone who had an expertise with distributed systems, mostly because I initially wanted to look at the distributed systems that the government was using, the Home Office was using for their system. So as we were talking and shaping the project, we realized that it would be also good to analyze the social media data where people were talking about their problems with the system. And then we thought NLP actually could really help us to kind of analyze all that big data. And then we reached out to someone at Warwick who is in the computer science department in my university. Yeah, so that kind of like yeah, as I said, like it was really it really shaped as we went along with the proposal, with the initial ideas. What really helped me, because I come from a qualitative traditional kind of sociology, and I have no idea about how NLP is implemented. What really helped me was that those computer scientists also worked previously with qualitative sociologists before, like social scientists before, so they knew. Um, I mean, they had a very specific, I think, perspective towards equity as well, and we kind of clicked on from the very beginning, and that really helped. So yeah, so every question that I had, I mean, you know, they're doing like topic modeling and all of those things. They could really explain that to us quite clearly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It sounds amazing, Julia. I mean, I think the thing with interdisciplinarity as well is, as with all project development, but particularly working interdisciplinarily, is the need to be pliable with your ideas. And I think when you're starting those conversations, acknowledging that that's just the seed of something that you're trying to grow into this full application form, and that it does have to change. And I think the most successful applicants are those who have that willingness to be flexible about their ideas, about the questions that they're able to answer, about the methodologies that they can deploy to do that. And I think your project is a really nice example of that. I've actually put Doya's link to, well, I say just Doya's project, but it's a team project, of course. With all these projects pull together a large team of people, or most of them do. And certainly there are multiply teamed projects that we fund through the Digital Good Research Fund. And you can see the link to Doya's and colleagues' project on the chat. It's worth noting that all of our different research projects in the Digital Good Research Funds round 1 and 2 have a web page like that, and you can link to those. You can find the links to all of that through the research function on our digitalgood.net webpage, and I think familiarize yourself with all of those. So you feel free to stay on the call. You're welcome to keep your camera on or turn it off. It's up to you. But I do see some questions coming in, which I will attempt to answer now. So we've got a question first from Selin. Can we involve a COI from a non-UK institution? Yes, you absolutely can, Selin. Thank you for the question. Probably the easiest way to answer this, and I see some of the other questions that are starting to come through about the UK and about being from beyond the UK and applying for this fund, can be answered by looking at our website and learning more about the role of international co-applicants or co-investigators and the UKRI policy on that. Generally, what we do say, in fact, no, definitely what we do say is that the lead applicant for one of the DGRF Research Fund projects must be based at a UKRI recognised research institution. There is a list of those on the UKRI website. You can find that list through the digitalgood.net webpage. And we would expect that the lead applicant would be, therefore, most likely from the UK and certainly based at a UK institution, I should say. COIs, though, will come very often from further afield. You'll see from previously funded projects that we have funded plenty of research projects where there are COIs from around the world. We really encourage applications that do that as part of our internationalization focus as a network. So thanks, Selin, for that question. I see similar questions have come in from a couple of anonymous attendees. Is the call only open to UK universities and citizens? No, that's not the case. Do you need to be from or in the UK to apply? You would need to be from a UKRI recognised research office to be the primary or the lead applicant, and that is that. But beyond that, people from around the world are involved in Digital Good Research Fund projects from the first 2 rounds. So please, we would like to continue with that. Federico has asked a question here. I have an interdisciplinary research idea relevant to one of the 3 target themes that holds potential for future integration with previous work from the Digital Good Network, but does not build on previous work because it addresses a different challenge. Can it still qualify for submission? Federico, I think it's such a good question. Federico, sorry, it's a really good question. I think the really important thing to remember here is when we use the word build, both in terms of building the digital good, but also building on previous work. We are, as ever, not trying to be prescriptive. You can take that in lots of different ways. But for me, the idea that your project might actually have potential future integration possibilities with existing work or existing findings from the network sounds like it's absolutely on the money. It sounds like it's exactly the sort of thing that we wouldn't be funding. The fact that it covers a different challenge area is not a problem necessarily, as long as there are some kinds of consonances or overlaps that can be drawn out in the application. Now, in terms of the fact that you mentioned the different target themes, and they perhaps are not exactly the same ones, I think you might be able to find a relatedness with a range of different projects. I'm not just talking about you, Federico, but across the board, various different applicants will see different ways that their work can connect with lots of different research that we funded already. I appreciate that the application form is not all that long and it would be really difficult to surface all of those links. But if you do see a few primary connections that you can kind of articulate in the application form, please do so. That will make it much easier for the reviewers to see that you're not only building the digital good, whatever it is you take that to mean based around the call text, but also building upon existing digital good network research. I do hope that that's helpful, Federico, but basically what I'm saying is that sounds like it's absolutely within the scope. One of our anonymous attendees has asked whether they can be an applicant if they're an independent researcher or consultant and not associated with any university. We do tend to have applications who are attached to institutions. It can make it easier for contracting. To my understanding, it wouldn't necessarily preclude someone from being a COI if the costing could be worked out, but the main applicant would indeed still need to come from a UKRI recognised research organisation in the UK. And that means that although the COI may not be associated with the university, and indeed I think we have had independent researchers involved in DGRF funded projects before, the lead applicant would still need to, I'm afraid. But hopefully you have connections with folks that would be eligible for that. Faraha has asked a question here about the hostile environment and is interested in Dirya's work. That's great to see. Please do engage with Dirya's work. Dirya is really open to people engaging with it as well. So do get in touch if you have more interest about that, Faraha. Put a thumbs up. Yes, fantastic. So you're an ECR, Faraha, who's based outside of formalized research institutes trying to access funding, but leads need to be based within academia. Yeah, they do. But are there fora available where people are chatting in which potential collaborations between those in and out of academia can be formed? Alas, you've missed the sandpit for this year's round, Faraha, I'm afraid. If you are interested in making connections, you would now have to do that yourself, and I can't necessarily come up with clear ideas of how you might do that on the spot, but there are certainly people on this call who have an interest in applying for this fund as well, so you may recognize names and get in touch with folks that way. Unfortunately, though, the sandpit has come to a close. We do run an annual sandpit, but Faraha, I'm sorry that the situation for you, I know it's an awful one to be in. Do reach out to Dirya about that work though if you're interested in it, and best of luck as you move forward and try and find opportunities. Haley Austin, does a sociologist have to be the PI? Good question, Haley. So does it, with the ESRC, does it have to be 50% social science? So we are funded by the ESRC. The Digital Good Network is funded by the ESRC. You are funded by the Digital Good Network. So you're guided by the call information that we have put out in our call, Haley. So no, you needn't be a sociologist to be the PI or the lead. You'll see actually across the different PIs and leads that we funded in our projects, a whole range of different disciplines that lead the projects and indeed are involved with the projects as COIs and partners as well. So no, you don't have to be a sociologist. Does it have to be 50% social science? No, I don't think that it would need to be 50% social science, nor do I think that you'd be able really in interdisciplinary context that we work in these days, be able to easily quantify that anyhow. I think it needs to be really clear, and this is the main thing, Haley, it needs to be really, really clear that you are connecting to the call, the digitalgood.net call that you'll find on the website, where it makes really clear that the basis of any of these applications is the idea of the digital good, which then would draw in some social science sort of inflected thinking and intellectual work that the network has been doing. But it does not have to be led by a sociologist, does not have to be led even by a social scientist. We're really, really keen actually to encourage lead applicants from other disciplines who can be in conversation with us. So the network itself, more broadly speaking, is interested in drawing together different disciplines. So please do not think that we're being over prescriptive in that way and making sure that everybody is a sociologist who leads. It just so happens that Dirya today is a sociologist and has joined us for this call. I hope that makes sense, Haley. Best of luck with your application. Dan, who's also based in Sheffield. Hi, Dan, also in Sheffield today. Is there a possibility that the upcoming strikes might change the bid deadline and timetable? Thanks, Dan. Folks may know that there is a period of industrial action coming up in the UK, but specifically at Sheffield University and at other universities in different ways. I don't think there's kind of a national action at the moment. Currently, Dan, there isn't any plan to do that because there is no clarity over whether all strikes are going ahead in different institutions. It's a very patchwork situation. We think there's enough time in this call for people to be able to put together fulsome applications. If things change with the industrial action, it's something that we will revisit. But at the moment, because they're so localized in different ways, we're not going to be addressing that. However, a number of our different events have had to be moved because of the industrial action, or cancelled indeed because of the industrial action. And so solidarity to colleagues who are striking. Thanks, Dan, for the question. Liam Wrigley has asked a question. Hello, Liam. It's good to see your name. Liam, I think, is an old colleague from Sheffield. You have another co-investigator as an ECR. You are an ECR. Can we have two ECRs? Liam, yes, of course. You could be a fully ECR team if you wanted to be. Early career research team. Very often it requires the experience of somebody who's been applying for funds before, so it can be helpful to draw in people who've got much more experience in applying for research funding, who might be professors, senior lecturers, and so on. But yes, it may well be that a full team could be early career researcher. There's no sort of upper or lower, there's no upper limit on how many ECRs technically really you could involve in a team, but we would expect, of course, there to be at least one. Maria from Sheffield Hallam University, another Sheffielder. Hello there, Maria. In terms of budget distribution, is it expected that the PI gets a higher percentage from the grant? Are there any guidelines about this? Maria, I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but I'm imagining this might be something around salary budgeting and things like this. If that is the case, then no, not necessarily. It depends on who the PI is. So, for example, if Maria, you are an early career researcher and you are the PI, or the lead applicant, as the ESRC will call it these days, and as the early career researcher, to be able to do the project, to be contracted to your organisation, you needed a salary to be costed. It may well be that you were the biggest chunk of costing in your project. However, Maria, if you're a professor and you're taking 40 grand out of the 75 grand and leaving a sort of a piddly amount for your RA to do the work, then that would not be within the realms of what I would imagine a supportive ECR development practice. So in that case, the lead applicant, I would expect to not actually get a significant portion of the funds. And indeed, sometimes we see senior colleagues who are helping people to apply for this fund offer their time in kind as a different kind of contribution. If you don't know what that means, very often universities will sort of stump up in kind costs. So it might be that they give some time of one of their professors rather than expect money for it in return for getting some money for the ECR that they do fund as part of the project. So it's a sort of a quid pro quo, if you like, and very often it's configured that way with costing. So no, there is no expectation that PIs get a higher percentage from the grant. It would entirely depend upon the configuration of the team, sort of the constellation of different applicants and where the ECR sits in that. I hope that makes sense. But if you've got any more questions about that, Maria, specific to your case, then please do get in touch with us, info@digitalgood.net. Claire has data and design expertise, looking for collaborators. Do we have a way to match researchers? I'm sorry, this is like the earlier question. You've missed the sandpit, which was a really good way of connecting people together. So no, we don't necessarily have a route for doing that. But folks saw Claire's name there. If you think you're in interest, then Google her and Google them and get in touch, and it might be a new connection that's formed. I'm sorry about that, Claire. Elena or Alina, if you have an international co-investigator, for example, from France, does the PI's university still need to cover 20% of the project's costs? Elena, here we go. You've asked a full economic costing question, which I can't answer. Ruth probably can, but I would suggest that you drop Ruth an email at info@digitalgood.net if what she has just typed into the chat or types into the chat next doesn't answer the question for you. There are different rules around full economic costing, sometimes called FEC. That's what FEC stands for, depending upon where the applicant or the co-applicant is based. Itzel, hello, good to see you. Do all team members need to be named in the application? If you're envisaging an RA, should we know from the beginning who this person is? Fantastic question. The answer to it is no. You don't need to know who everybody involved in the project is. We've had some really nice examples of projects where the research assistant or research associate who is employed on the grant is not named, is not even identified at the point of of developing the project. In fact, Duyas is a nice example of that. Duya, I think that you have a research assistant or associate connected to your project. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we do work with a bilingual research assistant for the interviews, yeah. But we didn't name that in the application.
Yeah, but you put together a job application after you got the funding, and then they're
Yeah.
obviously getting development opportunities through the project as well, aren't they, as well as yourself?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So I think in terms of including a research associate or assistant, no, you certainly don't need to name them. It may well be that that's your way or route of getting early career research and development in. If you know somebody for whom the project would be really great, so why not get in touch with them now and ask if they want to become a co-applicant on that project, you know? It depends entirely on the circumstances. If you're looking for someone with a particular skill set, as Durya was, then it'd be more appropriate to hire after the fact. But if you're looking for somebody who, but if you already know of somebody and think they'd be a fantastic co-applicant, then there are ways. It can take more work because the university has to underwrite something like this and say, and write a letter to guarantee that they'd contract a person, for example, if they're not attached to the university as it's currently. But there are ways of doing that in an equitable manner. So if you've got somebody in mind, then please do feel free to name them. If you do not, then be really clear why you've not named them, what skills you'd be looking for, and how you'd be weaving those in for their own leadership development. Hello, Victor. Good to see your name as well. With the current situation in universities, how would we operate if somebody gets funding and is then made redundant from their institutions? No, you're right, Victor. There isn't a straightforward answer for that question. I know I have no clue how that would work, but you're quite right. In these circumstances where we're moving into a situation in the UK where that's more and more likely, then we should probably reflect on that. If you've got a particular question around that, Victor, get in touch with info@digitalgood.net. But I will just look at Ruth now and say we probably need to have a conversation about that. But thanks, Victor, for raising it. An anonymous attendee is asking if they can submit 2 applications, but different topics and different teams. Anonymous attendee, you've got far more energy than the rest of us. You could, I suppose, yes. I think people have asked that question before, and we've said yes. I don't think there is a sort of an upper limit of how many applications somebody can apply with. But as Durya said, you know, and take Durya's advice here on point, you know, it takes absolutely ages to put together a strong application. And each time you put one together, that's twice the amount of work. So there is a question there about whether there's value in doing that. I can understand that you might be sort of like named sort of incidentally in one, but be central to the other, and that might be appropriate in your case, but don't stretch yourself too far, anonymous attendee, is my advice to you. Would you recommend as the maximum budget for each application, considering that 75k is not advisable? What would I recommend? I don't know why, anonymous attendee, you would think 75k is not advisable. 75k is the upper limit of what we're funding. We don't take costing into account when it comes to panel decisions. Okay, so if the costing is value for money for what you're proposing to do, and what you're proposing to do meets the core guidance, then it will be funded. If when it gets to panel and the decision is made, the costing is not the thing that sort of decides whether something is or isn't funded. We will bring into question and cost challenge things where it's unacceptable that you're costing at a certain level, but there is no sort of lower or upper expected kind of like ideal limit for what we're funding here. And the reason that we say 75k is because some proposals where they might be developing like a proof of concept for a digital health application might be really costly, whereas other proposals might be less costly. It depends on what you're planning to do. So we try to offer that flexibility through having a good range of costing. And I hope that is helpful and doesn't come across in any other way than to say cost for what is valuable for your project. Anonymous attendee, if you're an international team member, do they get paid? Yes, there are different mechanisms available for different institutions, and Ruth, who's just sat to my left, works tirelessly with lots of different institutions and lots of different international people in various different contexts who will be looking to be paid for their work. So yes, we absolutely do pay people through various different mechanisms. If you've got a specific question, please can you get in touch with info@digitalgood.net to talk about your specific circumstances. Itzel has another question related to Liam's. Can the team have 2 co-leads? It's a great question. The form really only allows 1 lead applicant. Is that right, Ruth?
Yes, you can have 1 lead applicant, but multiple co-leads.
Yes. So I think Adina's question is, Itzel's question is about whether you could have 2 co-leads in a sort of a symbolic distribution of labour. We've not done that before. And because of the scheme that we've got here, we wouldn't be able to do that on this occasion. What I would do instead, Itzel, is make it really, really clear the lead is leading for these reasons, but there is somebody else who will be taking on significant leadership roles as well. I hope that that makes sense. An anonymous attendee, I'm just going to have a sip of my cold coffee, bear with me. An anonymous attendee has asked, can you submit without a senior lecturer? I mean, as an early career researcher alone with no higher ranking faculty with you in the application. It's a great question. Earlier on, I mentioned our definition of early career researcher. It may well be that you are a senior lecturer and identify as an early career researcher. That does happen for various different reasons. So just because someone's a senior lecturer doesn't mean they're not an early career researcher. I think that's important to flag. But equally, I think the spirit of the question you're getting at is that do you need senior faculty with you to be able to apply for these funds? No, as Liam asked earlier regarding having multiple ECRs, you could have a fully ECR team if you wished. It just depends on whether you've assembled the right people to pull together the application that you want to, for work that you want to undertake, and that you've assembled the right people that can be deployed to realise the activities that you're proposing in that application. And if a full ECR team is what gets you that, that's fantastic. If it is not, and generally they do tend to be quite mixed teams where we have sort of professors, research associates and assistants, lecturers, senior lecturers, and various other kinds of sort of levels of faculty. That tends to be what works. But Daria, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I just want to say, so in our team, we are 3 ECRs, as like myself, including myself and the 2 co-investigators. But then there's also a professor who is again working on the distributed systems and who has offered to provide his time as an in-kind contribution. So you can also have that. So I just want to say you can have a professor who may not need the money as such, but who is interested in this topic and who's interested in helping you in some aspects of the work. Then they can also provide in-kind contribution for their time.
Thanks, Daria. That's really helpful. I think that, because I'd mentioned this idea of in-kind contribution, people who are more senior will know what that means. It basically is that they're offering to do something not for free because they get a salary from the university, but the university will offer basically potentially to free up some of their time, or they're willing within their working day to work with you, or even it can be quite modest, for example, in a mentorship role or something like that, that doesn't require lots of their time. There are different mechanisms for getting more senior people to be involved with your project, which means that most of the money can flow into the hands of early career researchers and the activities that the early career researchers are doing. So I think it's really worth remembering that. And as well, actually, seeing Daria on the call does remind me there, just back to Itzel's question about having multiple co-leads as well, is that when we have events attached to the Digital Good Network, we tend to invite the lead applicant plus any early career researchers that are involved in their team to come along to the events that we're doing. And I think it's worth mentioning itself that there are different ways of distributing the opportunities allowed by this research fund to make sure that multiple people are the beneficiaries, including people who may be co-applicants, not just the lead as well. So there are different ways of getting involved with the network that are certainly not precluded just to leads. Chinwe has asked a question, with the cuts to ODI, are you still keen to fund projects in LMICs? Yeah, we're very interested in funding projects that are based in lower middle income countries. Chinwe, thank you for asking. But I do think, Chinwe, it's worth reminding everybody on the call, as I mentioned earlier, the rule about eligibility for this call is that the lead applicant would need to be based at a UKRI recognised research institution. And that list is available on the UKRI website. Once that criterion has been ticked, then it's sort of a kind of the playing field's wide open, and we're absolutely interested in funding that kind of research or research that focuses in LMICs and contexts outside of the global north. But I do think it's also worth remembering that the main focus here, the big call, is around the digital good. So as long as that connection is made clear as well. So we're not going to fund something just because it's based in a particular country. We will fund something that's based in a particular country if it fits nicely within the call. I hope that that makes sense. Dan has asked a question that seems to refer to a previous one. Sorry, Dan, my memory is not so great. It's a good point. It's possible to build a bid to support an ECR, make sure they're centrally intellectually involved, but hire them after the bid decision. Ruth is just saying something now. Ruth.
I just want to flag that, yes, that's possible, but in terms of meeting the ECR criteria, we state that an ECR must be named. So
Yeah.
Separate things.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Yeah, so Dan, yes, absolutely. It is possible to, it's possible, yes, and very often does happen in our core, that opportunities for unnamed ECRs get built into a core as a research assistant or associate. They, of course, then would be centrally intellectually involved. Hire them after the bid. Yes, absolutely. We have plenty of occasions where Digital Good Research Fund projects are held back because it takes ages to hire somebody at the appropriate in the appropriate time frame. You know how these things go. But at the same time, naming somebody as an ECR in the call is now is integral to the fund as well. So Dan, that's not the only route into doing it, but it can be a supplementary route to really emphasize the commitment to ECR development if it's appropriate for the design. I hope that makes sense. Anonymous attendee asking how many applications are we ready to fund? Great question. I can't do the maths off the top of my head. It's likely to be within the realms of
4 to 6.
4 to 6, depending upon the costs that people ask for in their call. I hope that is helpful, but please do not let that either. It should have neither an effect of encouraging or discouraging you. I don't think it's just the maths that we have to work out this end after we've made our decisions. Is an applicant judged on the basis of the application, or do their publications matter? That's a great question. So we're judging applications here and the teams that are assembled to do the work that's proposed in the application. So we are not necessarily judging individual applicants. We do ask for a curriculum vitae, a CV, or a resume for each application, for each applicant. Reviewers may look at that, but everybody is signed up to the sort of the principles of judging people based upon the coherence of the application in total. So we're not looking at the number of applications or where the applications are based. We are looking at the sort of the quality of the application in general. I hope that makes sense. Anonymous attendee, can you please expand on who project partners are? Gosh, what a great question. That is actually down to the very bespoke definitions of UKRI. Ruth, have you got a link that you could pop in the chat there? So the anonymous attendee who has just asked about what a project partner is, Ruth's going to pop some information in the chat just to make sure that's really clear. And hopefully that will answer it. If it doesn't, then please do get in touch with us, info@digitalgood.net. We'll just jump on to the next question, which is itself. We're building on the previous work of the network involved using a data collection tool designed by the Digital Good Network. Obviously not just doing that, but a more complex project. Just wondering if this is allowed. No, this is not a naive question itself. I'm glad you answered it with your name, so I knew it was you asking. It's a great question. There are different ways that you can build on a research project, and we've kept that deliberately sort of baggy and ambiguous, which for some of you may be really unhelpful, but I think it means that we get a whole range of different ways of understanding that. For some, it may be the use of a data collection tool designed by and published by a project that we have funded before. Some of you may know that exists already. Some of you may kind of come upon it whilst you're looking at the digitalgood.net website. And think, oh yeah, that would work, that makes sense, or this particular sort of toolkit is really useful, let's test that out. But that's not the only way of building on a particular project that we funded already. So just to give an example that I'm thinking of right now, we've got a couple of projects that are coming up giving webinars. We've got Dylan Yamada Rice's work on children's experiences using digital technologies, and Alexi Webster and her project on queer joy as digital good. There are two really interesting projects there that haven't necessarily developed a specific tool, but that may have generated really interesting intellectual work on which your project might develop its own ideas and then grow from there. And both of them have published papers, got reports that you can learn about on the web pages for their individual projects, and obviously with the individual applicants as well. So that'd be one way to build upon a project. But it's not just the individual projects with the Digital Good Research Fund that we're asking folks to consider building upon. It's also the broader work of the network as well. So we've got outputs from the network as well, our BA discussion paper, the recent Building Blocks for a Good Digital Society paper. Both of those might be really helpful sort of launching pads for thinking about your ideas and articulating how your work has been shaped by or looks to challenge, to invoke, to draw upon ideas in those pieces might be another way of engaging with the network as well. So there isn't one specific way of doing this itself. There are lots of different ways. And indeed, the way that you do it is a really clear way of doing it, actually, which is actually quite unusual, I imagine. I don't imagine most projects would propose to do it that way, but that certainly sounds like one way of doing it. I hope that's helpful. Anonymous attendee has asked, can you name an ECR and then employ them if the bid goes through? Yes. So generally what we would expect is for people to apply would either already have a contract at the institution where they're based, or have it written in a letter of support from that institution that that institution would employ them for the duration of the project. This often happens when people are applying and they're not currently contracted to an institution, should that project be funded. So it's very normal that an ECR will be named in a project, tentatively saying, saying firmly, if it was funded, this person would work at this institution and do this. And that would be an absolutely reasonable way of going about pulling together your application, and something that we have supported before in people putting applications together. So one doesn't already need, if you like, to have a contract at an institution, but just needs to have the assurance of that institution that they would be contracted should the application be successful. I hope that that makes sense. I see that we've come to the end of our list of Q&A questions, and I can't see any others in the chat. So I think it's just left to wish everybody the best of luck with their applications, and to thank as well Durios Kuhl from the University of Warwick for joining us to tell us about, well, not so much about your project, I'm afraid, but Duri's work is all there to see on the webpage. So Duri, best of luck with your project as it comes to its end, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's really good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant. And thank you everybody else for joining us, and to my colleagues Ruth and Dee for being on the call, for making this so smooth. If folks have other questions related to the call, they can join, they can email us at info@digitalgood.net and we will do our best to answer them. But please, the best of luck as you pull together your applications. Think really carefully about doing it in the most thoughtful way to make sure that you can join all the dots and hopefully build the digital good with us in the third round of the Digital Good Research Fund. Goodbye, everybody.